Many people think that I am what is often referred to as a thalidomide baby, which I am not. I have a syndrome which affects not only my arms but also my heart and seems to also affect my lungs. During my lifetime, I've faced a lot of challenges. I've had a number of health issues to deal with. So I went to this children's hospital and I saw kids who had arms kind of like me and just different. And I kept hearing this word, handicapped, handicapped. And finally one day I went to my mama and I said, "Am I handicapped?" I started school in kind of an unusual way. I started school in the 3rd grade. At recess, we all went out and played basically the same thing, grades 1 through 6. And at this particular time, we were playing softball. And 2 of the big kids, big guys, would choose sides. Of course, I never got chosen, and so I'd just stay on the sidelines and cheer. Well, one year, Kenny Henson, not one year, one day, Kenny Henson chose me to be on his side. And I played softball that day, and I played from then on. It takes so little to include somebody. When I was about 3 years old, the doctor referred me to the Children's Hospital. This was before the days of early intervention and ADA and IDEA and IEPs and so forth. And so I went to this Children's Hospital and I saw kids there, kids who looked different, kids who had arms kind of like me and just different. And I kept hearing this word, handicapped, handicapped. And finally one day I went to my mama and I said, "Am I handicapped?" And she said, No, you're not. And I said, "Well, what is it?" And we thought for a while, and I said, I had heard the word birthmark, and I said, "Do I have a birthmark?" And she said, "Yep, that's what you do. You have a birthmark." And so I tend to, I don't typically use the word disability. I use the word inconvenience. I can remember learning to feed myself, and I was older than most kids when I learned to feed myself. When I eat, I bring the spoon up here and turn it upside down and put it in my mouth. It works for me. Well, the people at the Children's Hospital thought that it should go in right side up like all the rest of y'all people do. They started working with me with spoons, and my dad, he bent spoon handles and they put wood on the end of spoons, and they did this and they did that. And I remember my dad said to me, he said, and I was complaining, like I said, I was just a kid, 3 years old probably. And I said, "I don't want to do this. I want to eat like this." And now I did not eat with my feet, but my daddy told me, because I did everything with my feet, he said, "Well, you don't want to go into a restaurant and eat with your feet, do you?" And I said, "No, I don't." But eventually they quit trying all the different spoons, and I still eat, and I turn my spoon upside down, and it works. So, and I'm hungry and I'm fed, and so I'm happy. One of the things that was very difficult for me as a kid was something that's very personal, but it was going to the bathroom. And as you can imagine, I can't reach to pull my clothing down. I had a really hard time, and it took me a long time before I was able to do that. But I can't say that I ever thought I couldn't. I just kept trying to figure out a way that I could. My folks were very creative. I mean, my dad fixed my handlebars for me so that on my bicycle, so they were higher. So we just kind of worked together to figure things out. There were those people who felt that artificial arms would be the best thing. So they made me artificial arms, and I absolutely hated them. And I could do so much more without them than I could with them. And eventually, my parents decided that I was better off without them than I was with them, so I didn't have to wear them anymore. So we did a lot of trial and error and experimenting and that kind of thing, yeah. I learned to drive when I was about 13 years old. And I drive a tractor. I drive a manual transmission. When I first started driving, I used my foot to change the gears. I had a Volkswagen Beetle, and when I first started driving, I had somebody with me, and I'd tell them I drew out how the gears went, like first, second, and so forth, the H. And I would tell them, okay, first gear, second gear, and tell them when to change gears. Well, that got old, so then I just started using my foot. And now that I'm old, I actually have an extension put on my gear shifter so I can do that easier. Now, I've had a lot of challenges. When I went to get my driver's license the first time, the examiner would not even give me a test. My dad was with me, and he took me to another office. The guy there gave me the test. I passed with flying colors, no problems at all, except for one thing. And this will date me or age me, but I had to have electric turn signals because at that time, not every car had electric turn signals. When I was learning to water ski, if whoever was in the boat would really take off really fast, I couldn't hold on, just jerk the rope right out of my hands. My dad worked with me in a lot of ways, so he started taking off a little slower. Piece of cake then. I have my student pilot's license. Well, it's expired now. So I've had a very full life, and that is because so many people have supported me and have given me opportunities. I was born into a Seventh-day Adventist family many years ago. My parents were very young. My mother was 21 and my dad was 22. My grandparents were Seventh-day Adventists on both sides of my family. And I stayed in the church and went regularly until I was in college. I went to Southern Missionary College, and about my sophomore or junior year, my cousin and I decided that instead of going to church, we'd go for a walk and worship in nature. You know, we grew up in an area that is very rural, and every Sabbath afternoon, her family and I and our family would get together, and we would go for Sabbath afternoon walks. So this was very natural to us instead of going to a great big church. It kind of became a habit for us. And when I graduated and came home, I no longer had the desire to go to church. It was quite a while, and I started dating a man who had no religious affiliation, and for some reason I decided it was time for me to go back to church, and he came with me. We married, he was baptized, and we had a couple kids, and we were quite active in the church until we got a divorce. And I was no longer comfortable in church. So I tried other Adventist churches that were close by, and none of them seemed to fit. So I began worshiping at home. And again, just basically quit going to church. Eventually, I started dating Howard.
I met Faye about 45 years ago. I was like 18 and she was a couple years older. We were at the local college taking a night course. We knew each other, but not really know each other. Then we dated for a while. I went our separate ways and came back together briefly and went our separate ways again. And the last time it was, God said, boy, you better pay attention.
Howard was raised a Baptist and then became a Methodist. And so occasionally we go to the Methodist church and occasionally we come to the Adventist church.
And we have had every argument or discussion, whichever you want to call it. Of course, I was right and she always said she was right. And I would ask her a question or try to make a point, and she always had the scripture to back up what she said. And to be honest, I didn't.
And one day, out of the clear blue, he said, let's go to prayer meeting. And I said, okay. And that was the beginning of our journey back.
I never, ever expected to be in the Seventh-day Adventist Church. And being married to Faye is the second most wonderful thing that's ever happened to me. Accepting Jesus Christ, of course, was the most wonderful. But Faye is a wonderful human being, and she is probably the most godly person I know.
Eventually, we became pretty involved in the church, and one day, Pastor Roy Robinson came to our house, and he told me about this program. It was for elders to help their pastors better. I thought that was interesting, except for the fact I wasn't an elder. So we prayed about it, and I decided to do it. I was a little discouraged, and actually I was a lot discouraged, and when I found out some of the things that I had to do, I had a long discussion with God. And I told him that that was not necessarily what I was expecting, and I did not want to do it. And I argued with God until 2 o'clock, maybe 3 o'clock in the morning. Have you ever argued with God? He always wins. And so I said, okay, but if I do this, you are going to have to provide, and you're going to have to help me. And I want you to know, I could tell you story after story how the Lord has provided and how He has worked. And then some years later, the conference developed a program for volunteer lay pastors. And I became a volunteer lay pastor. I have served as the pastor of the Table Rock Church since 2013. I've just been really, really blessed. And I think a good part of that is because people have accepted me for who and what I am. I use my feet a lot. I type with my feet, wash dishes with my feet. I do a lot with my feet. I operate the computer upstairs with my feet. And when I need to do something, I usually just plop down on the floor and do what I need to on the computer, and nobody thinks anything about it, nobody says anything. One thing I have learned from my experience is that sometimes we place limits on ourselves that we don't need. If you are a teacher or a parent or a grandparent or a sibling or a friend of a child or an adult who has what I call an inconvenience, work with them, help them. First of all, accept them just as they are, but don't be afraid to try different things with them. Be creative. There are so many things that we can do, all of us can do, if we try, if we don't let fear or preconceived ideas to hold us back and enjoy life. There's so many things out there that you can do, and that maybe you'll have to do a little bit different, but try, because life is good and there's so many things you can do if you really try.